Thank you for staying with us on Fafanua Africa today. We are still talking about women in technology. And in case you're just joining us, well, you've missed a little, but not the entire show anyways. We are celebrating the International Women's Month. The month of March is the month for women, basically, in case you didn't know. So here's wishing myself and every woman out there a happy International Women's Month. And of course, we also had a day set aside to celebrate the women, both in Africa, in the continent, and outside the continent, generally across the world. Now, there is no doubt that the tech industry is male dominated, but women are starting to make their presence felt in a big way. Now, one of the most important things to note about this trend is that it is not just happening in the United States or in Europe. Women in tech are making a global impact in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. And of course, you know that Africa is our major focus. But the question is, are the women in tech in Africa meeting up to standard when it comes to, doing great things? And that is not basically just to say that the women themselves are not doing exceptional, but is the environment conducive enough? Is the government doing enough to support them? Are the people encouraging them enough? And that's why we will be talking about gender equality. Now, women are starting up companies, coding apps and making a difference in their communities. This is an important movement to watch and support because it is changing the landscape of the tech industry. Now, you'd agree with me if you look at the statistics, you see that there are so many, tech industries that are run by women and co-owned by women that have been successful over time. So the question is, why do we still have an issue of gender inequality when it comes to tech, when obviously the women have proven over time that they can deliver? Now, on the first half of the show, I had my estimable guest, the Professor Nina, who joined me and, spoke extensively about it. And I also had Naomi, who also is a HR expert and joined me to talk about tech, and, grateful to them for an amazing first half of the show. Now, on this second half of the episode, I would like to introduce my guests, who, by the way, kicked me out of your conversation backstage, and I'm calling them out right now. But anyways, my first guest is Wendy Nanfo, the head of operations, Kuda in Uganda. Thank you, Wendy, for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much, Blessing. Pleasure.
My pleasure. Really and of course, Nancy Nwosu, a content strategist in Nigeria. Thank you, Nancy, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Blessing, for having me. It's
my pleasure.
I'm
you see, I told you I was going to get back in the conversation, no matter how long it took. So here I am, and I'm in control. But anyways, it's glad to have you both with me on the show. And happy International Women's Day /month to you both.
Same to you. It's our month. We're being celebrated.
We're
going to be celebrated all day.
Of course. In fact, they could do it all year. We don't mind.
All
right. Thank you once again for joining me on the show. Now, we are going to be having the conversation. I mean, of course, about the women in technology. There are so many facets that we could talk about, but I want us to focus on women in tech, especially in Africa, right? Globally, but especially in Africa. And I don't know if you followed in on the first half of the show, but we talked about why women are discouraged from going into tech, and we traced it to the gender biases that has been for a long time, and how that discourages the average woman from getting into tech. So we're going to continue that conversation, and let me start with you, Wendy. What do we say about the difference in pay? And this is still talking about gender inequality. I remember on the first half, Professor Nina mentioned that the truth is men in tech still seem to be more prioritized than the women in tech. And one of the ways we find out is the difference in pay, regardless of the fact that they're doing almost the same things. And sometimes even the women perform better. So what do we say about that?
That's a very good statement, Blessing, and it's something that I think personally I've actually ended up experiencing in my work life. We find that you would definitely have a male colleague starting out in a role, and they would get paid more than you are getting paid, even if you're taking on more tasks. So I think it does come down to companies. If you have an HR policy and you say this entry-level job or at this level, this is the amount of money you need to be paying these people, I think it's very important to start or to stick to those values that you have set out. But also be able to recognize value without exactly looking at the gender of the person. if a lady or a woman or a man is being able to bring value on the table, there should be KPIs that should be able to measure that, so that gender is the last thing that should probably be considered, should not even be considered at any one time. So I think companies should be able to be strict on that, be able to revise their HR policies, be able to, and I know that they want to save up on some money, but if they set amounts of salaries that they need to be giving to, at a certain entry level job or mid management or top management, that should be the offer that should be given to anyone that is actually in that particular role. And also, I think the other part is around women. We have been, I don't want to call it depressed I don't want to call it depressed or oppressed. I don't want to call it that, but we don't come out to actually negotiate our salaries. Most of the time, being in Africa, when you're offered a job, you're more than grateful to take it, and whatever amount of money that they're giving you, at that point, you're probably saying yes because of the low employment in most of the African countries. But I think when you understand your value, and I think that's something women, we fall back on, being able to understand our value from whatever job you're doing, be it something low, beginner, coming up, top management. When you understand your value and understand that you can be able to add value to that company, you should be able to negotiate better. Most of the time, and this is to women, most of the time the first amount that is offered to you is lower than what the company is actually going to be paying. So I think we need to be able to take it upon ourselves to say, well, this is the amount of money you're offering. It's great, you're offering me employment. However, what I can add to your portfolio is A, B, C. And for the same thing, for someone in Nigeria or someone in Kenya or someone actually even in the US, if I'm bringing the same value as those people and I believe I can do it, you should be able to defend yourself and negotiate a salary that speaks to what you actually do.
All right, thank you so much for that, Wendy. I mean, that was spot on. Now, Nancy, let's still talk about, the gender bias when it comes to policy making. Now, it is said that policy making in the digital technology space is not gender neutral. So does this mean that we agree with that narrative, looking at the fact that the pay sometimes differs, the recognition sometimes differs? And if that is the case, then what can be done? What kind of policies can be implemented to make sure that these things do not stand in the way of women?
Thank you, Blessing, for that question. I really would say it's not about what can be done. It's about who do we put in the room, right? So we have a lot of men in the room negotiating and speaking on behalf of the women. They do not understand our circumstances. They do not understand our plights. They do not understand us as women, issues that are peculiar to us because of our gender. So I would say that we as women should strive to get into those rooms where the policies are made. We should leave behind this "I am not enough" mentality. We should become audacious enough to step into those rooms and know that I am enough. I deserve a seat at this table and I can contribute intelligently for other women. Don't think you're doing it for you. You are doing it for the generation that is coming after you. Because these policies we are talking about, with a woman in the room while these policies are being made, she's a better representation of she's a better representation of us, and she understands better what women need. Okay. So it's not really about what are we going to do about it. It's about who do we put in the room, okay? Who is going to speak on our behalf? Who is going to represent us? I would say we need better representation in the policy-making rooms. We need women to go in as policymakers, not just sitting on the sidelines and just being there. We need more women as policymakers.
I mean, that's a very, very important point that you raised there, Nancy, and thank you for bringing up that. I mean, we've seen a lot of times where men make decisions on women's behalf, but then again, a lot of people will tell you that sometimes women are women's problems in a situation where a woman is in charge, and you think that she will resonate more with you because she is a woman and she understands what point you're coming from. She understands the issue of gender bias and the need for gender equality, but still you see women oppressing other women in workplaces. I mean, there was a time in Nigeria, I don't know if you were aware of that, but there was a time where on one of the social media platforms, toxic bosses was trending. And then you see that
Yes.
almost 60-70% of the toxic bosses were actually women, supposedly toxic bosses. So what do we say in that situation where you think that the women will get there? Now, we're not saying that women should get into power and become biased towards women, but we're just saying that in a situation where women get into power and refuse to understand the plight of other women, it's just, an example of what's happening in politics, where a politician will claim to understand what the youths are going through and claim to want to do better for the youths, and will get there and start thinking like an old man, and you're wondering, where's this coming from, So it's similar to what happens, in so many companies where you think the women will be the ones to resonate with you and to be more receptive and to fight more for gender equality, but the difference is usually the case.
So I studied international relations for my BSc, and I'll tell you something called rule of law. And again, nobody is above the law. Now, the day these policies are made is not the day you walked into the office of your female boss for whatever reason you came in and she's being harsh on you. Once these policies have been laid out, it's easy to handle any woman who chooses to become an obstacle. Our theme this year is equal equity. We are asking that everyone should be treated with equal fairness and justice. But sometimes women can be women's biggest problem. What do we do at times like this? We go back to the books. We go back to the policies that were written at the onset. So, because nobody is above the law, it is very easy to put it to that difficult boss, to put it to that difficult person at the point in time. This is what the law says concerning this situation that I have come to you about. If you choose to obstruct the law, I am going to leave you to the full wrath of justice. So again, we are back to policy.
Okay, I mean, rightly said. I don't know if you're in the right profession, because I hear law all over you. But anyways, thank you for clarifying that as well. Now let me come back to you, Wendy, and this is something that I would really love for us to talk about. Now, we're talking about International Women's Day. We're basically celebrating the essence of the woman, and trying to highlight the need for gender equality. What do you think the message of the International Women's Day should pass to not just the women now, knowing their rights and fighting for equality, but to the opposite gender and the rest of the world? Because at the end of the day, no matter how much we clamor for gender equality, there's little to nothing we can do if the other people do not see things from our own perspective. We'll just keep fighting for it and never get recognized or never, get what we want. So what message do you think this should pass to especially the opposite gender and the rest of the world?
Thank you so much, Blessing. I think for me, it's good that you set it out to say to the opposite gender, but I'll start with the women first, because I think if you intend to change something, you start with yourself. I like to resonate with Michelle Obama's quote around "there's no limit to what we as women can do." If you are about to change, you start with yourself. If you believe in yourself, belief gets actually pretty contagious. The people around you start believing in what you're believing in. So before we even pass a message to the male or to the men in this world, we need to start believing in ourselves. We need to create places where we have voices to be able to communicate that belief to them. So the work starts within us, then it actually goes on to the rest of the people. I think to the men is it's time to recognize value that is brought on the table without even thinking about inequality or it's just a woman. I have been called a girl in a meeting before. I was very high, but I knew at that point I had to do more. I had to bring in more than just appearance or title. I had to understand everything they were talking about. I had to know more than what they're talking about. So it's something, again, that starts with you. And with time, they start understanding the value that you're bringing on the table. So in terms of what Nancy referred to around policies, I think it also starts from that way, to be able to change a whole generation on how they had to, to think of things or see things. With regards to policies, we need those policies to be able to give women a voice, to places in the room, like Nancy had mentioned, to be able to speak out. to be able to put up front there to communicate this message, to show, it's not even a message, to show them that we actually can.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Wendy. Now, also, Nancy, I would like for us to also talk about the fact that it looks to as though even from the elementary stages, and I'm talking about all over the world now, but majorly in Africa, because that's where we see things like this happen. So in the elementary stages, we see, for example, in your primary school, your secondary schools, there are certain subjects that are more concentrated on women, and some of the languages used are, passing a very subtle message of, male dominance. I'll give an example. There's a subject we know as home economics, and then there's another one, introtech, and all of that. So sometimes you hear the teachers say, when the woman is in the kitchen, when the man is this, so you now see a lot of disparities, and the children now grow up to accept the fact that, okay, this is my own area, being in the kitchen, being, subject to certain kind of duties, and not being able to cross over to do something greater that I probably would love to do. So I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say, but I feel like it looks as though from our elementary stages in our society, they have tried to implant that into us. So what do you think can be done differently in our schools? Because that's like the bedrock of our learning. Everybody's learning. So if you impute that kind of mindset, that kind of narrative into both the men and the women, the men grow up to believe that. After all, they said the women belong in the kitchen, and then the women grow up to think that, after all, they say this technology thing is not for us, it's for the men. So what can be done differently?
So I'm going to answer this question because it's very personal to me. I did not see it coming, so thank you so much for asking it. When I was in primary school, I read this exercise book. I can't quite remember the name, but it has a story of a Simbi that has her hair plaited all back. I'm just seeing it in my mind's eye right now. And there is a story there of Simbi coming back from school. Mother is in the kitchen cooking. Father is in the parlor watching football. The brother is outside playing football.
Yes.
So that was where anybody that went to school in the late 90s, early 20s would understand what I'm saying, right? That was where the engineering started, right? So right now, we are producing a lot of adults, especially in Nigeria and other parts of Africa, who believe as women that their role is in the other room and in the kitchen. And we have a lot of men who believe that the only thing they have to bring to the table is their ability to provide. They're the ones who are supposed to be going for the hedge funds, going for the funding for their businesses. The women are supposed to be support. And I think that has been a tool for female domination and suppression for years. So number one, every adult from Nigeria until your mind gets into that space where you can handle an idea, you cannot get any results. You can't even think it because to you it's not possible, right? Now we move from that and we go ahead to talk about the fact that till today, that same textbook I just referenced is still being used. So there are so many things about our syllables that we have to look into. The educational sector is going to play a huge role. So SDG 4 becomes everybody's business. We have to remove a lot of things from the curriculum. That is not what is obtainable modern day. So you cannot raise a child and expect that child to function and to compete with his or her peers globally when from childhood you've suppressed the child with the quality of information available just because in your mind, this is what their minds can handle at this time. In some countries of the world, they are learning Igbo language, they're learning English because they are prepping their children for the future of trade, for the future of commerce, for international arbitrage going forward. We here are still telling children that head is for carrying load. It is still in a textbook in 2023. So the educational system has to be overhauled. We need to look at the curriculum. We need to sit down and get people who understand where we are going as a country, the focus of the youth, the possibilities that we can get our youth into right now. Imagine if a jurisdictionality of our economy only had access to that quality of information. Imagine if a Jihan Abbas of Kenya only had access to that quality of information. Imagine if a Wendy of Kuda only had access to that quality of information. So it comes down to us, women who are now at this level of self-awareness in our own circle, within our own networks. What can we do so that the children, the young girls coming after us do not go through this form of miseducation that has been packaged in a proper curriculum?
Thank you so much, Nancy, for speaking effectively to that. I mean, you didn't see the question coming. I didn't see that answer coming. Thank you so much for that. I would also like to ask Wendy, do you have anything to add to what she said?
Yes, for sure. Nancy, that was a really good submission. And I happen to be very passionate about the same, those things and how mindset, how girls are treated from a very early age. I like to make reference to Chimamanda Ngozi's book, A Feminist Manifesto. You know, she talks about how do we raise our girl children as feminists. And I know some people, you know, there's so many definitions of of feminism, you know, but in that book, she literally points out to things like choice of color, choice of toys, you know, what we call our children, you know, are you a princess or are you an engineer? Are you a pilot or are you a shopkeeper? It's these things that we instill. Those things create a mindset. It's what you hear, and then the child just grows up thinking, oh, all I have to do is is a princess, or all I have to do is be a mother, because that's all we are showing them from a very tender age. So what has been done in the past generations has been done, but I think to us, there's still so much we can be able to do to be able to change this mindset going forward. Knowing from the start that, you know, I have a daughter myself, a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm very, you know, very sensitive to what I mentioned, to open to what strangers say to her. You say we call her baby or princess, you say I'm not a princess, I am a girl, and you know, with so much energy to be out there to do things. And I think we as parents in this generation going forward, that mindset, if our children reach in schools, they exactly know who they are and that what they want to be. That even if the education curriculum, they will kind of force it to change to be able to suit that kind of children of this era.
All right, thank you so much, Wendy. Let me just take this opportunity to appreciate you both. I mean, you both have been fantastic on this show. I wouldn't even lie. I really appreciate having you join me. Thank you, Wendy Namfo, the head of operations, Kuda, Uganda, and of course, Nancy Nwosu, my lawyer, because I don't know what you're doing. You are a lawyer, a content strategist in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Blessing. Thank you. I greatly appreciate. And happy International Women's Day to all of us.
All the same to you. Happy International Women's Day. Thank you.